Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, Coaching for Success in Sport and Business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let them have it, coach.
G'day everybody and welcome to the Coaching Podcast. I have the pleasure today of meeting and introducing the world to Sjeanne Cawdry, who is a business advisor and quantum reinvention strategist. That in itself, Sjeanne, is just an awesome introduction. Just that title alone, I'm super excited about where this conversation is going to go. So welcome to the show.
So great to be here, and thank you so much for having me on your show, and to the people who listen. So great to have your time. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We never take for granted everybody's time, that's for sure. And also big shout out to Ron. We appreciate you and everything you do for women in leadership and speaking, who connected us, of course. So Sjeanne, you know, you have this just rare and formidable force at the intersection of business strategy, high performance leadership, and transformational reinvention. And I also love the fact that you have a sort of high performance squash background, ultra marathon running, really servicing leaders in crisis to really look at the way that the world is changing and how you can help shape that with your background in investment banking. So let's get stuck into a number of different topics. Look, I'm going to start with, you know, your business is called the Center of Liberation. So let's go there first. What does liberation mean to you?
Great question. Thanks so much for the invite into that space. And so Center of Liberation was really incepted when I myself went on a personal journey into my own heart space and the shift from, let's say, I want to say the logical left brain, and started identifying that it was time to really start, you know, stepping more into my own current of flow and liberating really what my message, and by message, I mean the essence of who I am, and then wrapping that around with words and bringing that quite formidably out into the world. And so that was like the center of liberation is liberating the heart to have a leadership role and position in my life, front and center. And then I apply my mental intellect around that and wrap my mental intellect around that. And that is essentially what I do with my clients, my business clients that I work with, and corporate clients, is that we really look to liberate more of the essence of who we are, to deliver results, create value, and bring, importantly, much needed change into the world.
It sounds easy on the surface to liberate the heart. But of course, it's not so easy to do that. I know it feels like it's a lifelong journey. But what are some of the ways that we can listen and tap into, you know, you talk about logic and intuition and the masculine and the feminine energy. How can we tap into that?
I'm going to answer this with maybe an analogy, and where it really, really became clear for me what liberation was really all about. And I mentioned to you just prior to going live, you know, how I'd moved from South Africa to the US. And during that time, that was a year and a half ago, where I literally packed up my life in South Africa at the age of 52, and all the elements, and a very successful and fortuitous career in corporate and investment banking at a leadership level, and friends and family and all of those kind of good stuff, and made my way here. And during that time, I spent some time on Whidbey Island here in the States, quite deliberately, to unwind from all the, let's say, programming, the logical left brain, the jump straight back into the corporate role, the hustle, the bustle, and get things going. And I really wanted just to kind of take a bit of sabbatical. And while I was on Whidbey Island, I had the opportunity of having a beautiful view across the bay of the gorgeous Mount Rainier in front of me. And there's a lot of beautiful eagles. And where we were positioned, I'd be able to watch the eagles. And I became quite enamored by how they operated. And in particular, I would watch them like taking flight into these currents. And it made me realize we all have a current of our life, that there's a very unique current that is ours. And when we are able to immerse ourselves into that current, it will take you for miles. So I'd watch these eagles like get into a current, and they didn't flap their wings. They just shot off or could glide for miles and miles. It was so intriguing. And I realized then that there is an energy system and a current, you might call it the universe, hence quantum, the universe, the field, the source that is all about around us. And each of us has this current that if we are able to surrender, and the act of surrendering. And so when the eagles let go of their branch or their tree and allow themselves to fall into the current, they will move very efficiently, and there's a whole new energy system. And so for me, that was around, there are impulses. The universe is sending signals and impulses to us. And so if you think of the eagle, they would have had to like sense the impulses of what is the right current for them to take. We get impulses, we might get like ideas and downloads, we might get intuitive hits, I call them, like suddenly out of the blue, you receive, information. I will often have what I describe as a bubbling up of information from my heart out of the blue. It's a message, for example, that says, sell the house, which is how I sold my house in South Africa. And literally a year later, the market was like so low. So it's these impulses and these currents that we have to tune into that are very specifically designed for us, in which we can then take flight. So some of my practices revolve around, and that comes back to the idea of center of liberation. And some of my practices include creating spaces of stillness and quiet for myself where I can tune into this. I have a very active meditation practice. Every morning I will follow that up with a walk in nature, and I will commune quite specifically with the creator, and I will ask direct questions, and I will continue to investigate. And I also have a contemplation practice. So depending on every day, I will implement some kind of practice. And when I receive an idea, this could be a business idea, it could be for a program that I'm running, it could be to go and talk to a friend, it could be a synchronistic event. When I receive an idea, I will work with the universe, with the field, with the quantum to unpack the entire contents of that idea through meditation, contemplation. So I get the full picture. And that's why I said center of liberation is the act of surrendering into the trust and self-trust of what I'm receiving, because that is the divine releasing messages to me. I'm the channel and the vessel that is here to bring that information into fruition. And that particular idea holds all the information from who the program is for example, or who the solution is for, what the price point is, what the design of the program is. And that's why I said center of liberation is around liberating that intelligence. And then once I've extracted all that information, there is the practical business strategy to implement. What are the channels I'm going to speak through? What's the marketing messages? How do I wrap information around this and get it out to market? So those are just some of the nuts and bolts.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think there's no doubt that from a perspective of sport, right? Squash actually was my first sport before tennis.
Oh, wow.
My dad sawed off he was from the UK, so squash was more popular almost than tennis back in the 70s. But he's, chopped off the handle of a racket. He was ahead of his time there and got me out on the squash court with my little wooden squash racket. Where I want to go with this is whether you're playing squash or whether you're playing tennis, the ultimate is being able to be in the moment, play point by point. That if you think too far ahead or too far in the past, which taps into what you're talking about, and you can only have that if you practice stillness. So still so many sports athletes don't understand this concept. None of them really practice any form of breathing, or they know about breathing, but they don't practice it. So I just want to flip it into your sports background for a moment. And what are your thoughts on, connecting what you just said, the stillness, and playing point by point?
Yeah, and I think that's such a great question, and especially when you're playing a dynamic sport like tennis or squash. I was an ultra distance marathon runner as well. That gave me a little bit more time to suss out what the solutions are. And when you really hone into what's happening in those moments, and I love, I really studied Rafa Nadal and Roger Federer for quite some time because I just found them absolutely fascinating. And I was fascinated by Federer's ability to be at the top and stay at the top. And really, what were the distinguishing factors that facilitated that? Because him and Nadal were two different players, and I'm going to drop into the answer for you now. I'm going to tie it back to that. Nadal was the feisty worker, the hustle, the grinder, and I was very much that type of player. And then you look at a Federer who was just this graceful, like it just happened. And what I came to realize is that many of us are the Rafa Nadals. We're chasing, we're hustling, we like working hard. And of course, he's got a huge amount of talent, which most of us do. But wow, he just like, he was this physical chaser. And I think the ability to stay present, so when I talk stillness, is to be able to regulate your nervous system in those high pressure moments, and regulating the nervous system and having that ability to come back to center. The distinction, you see, your heart always knows the very next step to take, the very next action, and your heart is actually able to intuit. It's got its own brain, and it's got its own sort of, I want to say, little cells and everything that actually operate in your heart. And it doesn't matter what pace, whether you are playing sport or whether you've got to make a decision in business, your heart is actually intuiting the next best action and step to take. That comes through in terms of, if you look at sport like squash and tennis, is that ability to really anticipate. It is a fine tuning, and the more you actually practice and hone in the skill of anticipating, and once you anticipate, and that's no different to business, you anticipate the future, you've then got to hone into the skill of then being able to receive the information that can only be done in presence. A guy like Federer is already anticipating. He's already started the movement. Number one, yes, there's the tacit knowledge and intelligence that is built in, but then there's this also a heart response that's taking him in a direction, and then there's the practical execution that comes after us, the practical, logical mind that picks the next best shot and gets in position to actually execute that. And I think the business leaders, the sports coaches, the sports people, those who hone that intelligence, and there's that sequence of intelligence, all of that has to be done in the present moment, moment by moment. It can't be done with me in the future ahead and then missing all of that important information. And so, I think that ability to cultivate it deliberately is something that's missing. And certainly in my experience in both, the ultra distance marathon running and the squash, was how quickly I was able to respond with precision and then trust that decision point. And you have to make the decision before you see the evidence, just like the eagle has to make the decision before seeing the evidence of the current. And so often we have to make decisions before we see the evidence. And one of the most costly mistakes that I will often talk about for myself or with my clients, I'll say to them, what's the most costly mistake you have made? For me, the most costly mistakes is when I don't trust, and I don't trust the selection of myself and my choices and my decisions, and I rather defer it to someone else's opinion or the logical left brain, which says you can't, you're not good enough, or whatever. Those have been the most costly decisions. And so learning to trust that you have to make decisions before there is evidence for it is the whole wrapped up concept, and selecting those decisions and that self-trust is the concept of liberation, because that is the unknown that you step into.
Well, I thought about 10 questions while you're answering that. So I want to go in so many different directions. So I'm trusting that I will know what to ask you next. I think we have to go down the road of quantum leadership.
Yeah.
I think we need to go there next, especially as it relates to the new paradigms and what's happening in the world today.
Mhm.
I know one of my mentors, talks about a company of one. You've got a category of one, leadership in this new era.
Mhm.
And that really is bringing out our true self, isn't it? Because at the end of
Mm.
the day, you can work for a company and you are your own brand. Just as you are, if you're a sports coach, you are your own brand, a company of one. So I love that concept, by the way. The category of one or the company of one in leadership.
Mm.
And what do we as coaches need to be aware of with this new way of leadership, this quantum leap? I mean, I couldn't think of anyone more qualified to talk about this topic than you, Sjeanne. So what have you got for us? And see if you can break it down to make it really easy for us to all understand such a big concept.
Yeah, it is a big concept, and it's big, and really it's quite simple. And so let me start with what do I believe quantum leadership is about. And quantum leadership is that servant orientated leadership, where we're moving away from the territorial, the individualism, the my territory, competition type orientated, not across the whole globe. And I don't want to say the world, because there's different, what I call timelines, and different realities. So I'm going to tie this all together. So a timeline for me is a particular reality that operates in a certain way. And you will still have the more controlling, competitive, top-down, structured, hierarchical, let's say, leadership, right? Which is what we are mostly used to in the world. Tell me what to do, I'll do it. Give me my KPIs. I'm going to, show me what you measure, I'll tell you how you perform and what's going on for you. But there's a splitting, and we're seeing the splitting in something, for example, like digital assets, crypto, Bitcoin. I'm going to use that, decentralized finance, right? That's an example of a new financial timeline, a new reality that is existing in a parallel reality to traditional financial ways of operating. You can go to the bank, you can get your money, you can do ATM, you can invest in traditional structures. Then you have a whole new ecosystem that's opened up that functions as efficiently. But what's the difference? It's decentralized. And so the quantum nature of quantum leadership is the ability to open up to new information, the ability to open up to an elevated sense of consciousness and connect more deeply for those who are like this way orientated. This is not for everybody. So it's people who are at levels of consciousness, and we're seeing a rise in consciousness on the planet, who are elevating their consciousness. What is happening in the elevation of consciousness? That is the ability to connect to information. Where does it come from? Where does an idea come from? How does it actually get into your brain from the universe? It's delivered, it needs a host, it needs to bring new information. How does Elon Musk send people to Mars? Where did that idea come from, that it was possible? From the universe. And so the universe, when I say that's the universal energy field around us, is populated with possibility of information. What we see in our current reality is only 1%, 99. So what I see as an individual, I see you across the screen here. I can see my desk, my computer, I've got my dog and that kind of stuff. That is only 1% of actually what exists. We don't see 99% of what exists in space. So the quantum is that element. And how I tie this together is, let's take the drive of something like decentralization. And there's many elements and other examples of this drive for sovereignty. Let's take the rise in consciousness. Let's take this movement of, in particular, women's wealth transfer. There's various, but there's a women's wealth transfer that's $30 trillion. Over the next 10 years, it will come into the hands of women who, for the first time, will be in a position, not everybody, but to have more personal income than males. So that's another big decentralization of power structures. And the final one is AI. So I really look at these four huge trend changes that have already created new paradigms. And what I mean by the new paradigm, as I say, there's new ways of operating in the world. And when we just look at AI in particular, which ultimately is decentralizing human intelligence into abundant intelligence that is now accessible to all and democratized. I'll come back to the rise in consciousness. That means that individuals, humans, teams, organizations need to get very clear about what it is that is unique and distinct about me. Because it's no longer just the logical left brain. That a lot of that's going to be done by AI. All our things that we pride ourselves on. And so I believe that one of the elements that's been really becoming available and turned on for us is how we are now able to access new levels of information, new levels of consciousness, and actually become quite deliberate creators of our reality, whether that's ourselves or our teams. I think it's the universe's way of saying your power, as in your ability, you as a being and a very powerful being, your power really sits in your ability to create, and the currency that is of utmost value is really your sense of true self and being able to really hone in on what makes you really unique that AI can't do. And I think that's going to create a lot of fear for people. And so the quantum is how we encourage people to truly become creators and unblock their ability to receive new information and then take action with new information.
The word curiosity comes up when you're talking because it's the one thing that I still think that AI, I mean, it may be able to be curious one day, but right now it's all past-based. So it is still one of the leverages that we have. And when we unblock that ability, for us to become our truest self and our unique and creative self, when we can tap into that, I think that will keep us ahead of the game. So could you summarize the 4 paradigms? I just want to make sure I got them correct. So AI,
which goes from scarce intelligence that a lot of people are currently paid for because that's their logical, this is the role, I'm paying you for this intelligence. So AI into abundant intelligence, we see, for me, is the one. And there's probably 7 or 8. I just want to mention before I go to the other 3 is what makes this period so unique and why there is so much confusion globally and in the system is because there's probably about 8 trends that have converged all at once since 2020. It's not one trend like the manufacturing trend or the internet trend. It's these 8 mega trends that have converged now all at once, and they're starting to what we call the hockey stick effect. They're starting to get to, we passed early adoption and we're getting into mainstream adoption, but it means that the world has changed. The world has reinvented. And the stuckness and the confusion that many organizations, leaders, entrepreneurs, people are just not spending money. They don't know what they want. They're confused. They're lost. They know there's a problem, but they just can't put their finger on it. It's because all of this convergence and because we're on these new paradigms, new timelines, the nature of the problems have changed. And so the other 3 that I specifically talk about, so there's 4 in total that I work with my clients on, is AI. I work with them on the wealth transfers. And that's, women's wealth transfer together with there's 2 or 3 other big transfers happening. And so how to set up in profitability pools. But not only that, to understand that the real wealth transfer is going to be the wealth transfer back into your being, your true self, to really know your secret source, what you're really capable of. And then bringing that will translate into wealth in your bank account. I talk about digital assets and this whole concept of decentralization and different financial models and opportunities and, how money works. I'm not a financial advisor, but I've got extensive knowledge. And finally, then combine that with the rise in consciousness. And the rise in consciousness, which is really taking shape quite significantly, is also speeding things up. People want something different. They are not everybody, but people are saying, hey, I want more freedom. I want to be free of the constraints that I'm currently experiencing. I want to experience myself in more fullness.
So let's go to the workplace. What about people that are bringing their entire self to the workplace? Maybe they've had this moment of true self and they're bringing all of their stuff to the workplace. I mean, that's definitely changed since COVID. You see it even with the screen. I mean, I can see the back of your house potentially, or your office. So you can see mine type way of thinking, as well as people now saying, I can't do this because I've got to go pick up my kids from school. So I want to talk about leaders and managers dealing with people who are bringing their entire self, I'm talking about all of their self, which is, on one aspect, it's a good thing. And the other aspect, it's like, whoa, that's a lot for managers and leaders. What advice would you have around that?
Such a great question. And in fact, I was just discussing with a client this morning, implementing a program in her organization, with a lot of it centered around there's new elements of mastery for leaders. And some of them we know, and some of them have evolved. And one of them is I come from business transformation change, and there's various, change leadership and transformation leadership models and all of that. And all of them are great. And there's now this kind of evolution of these models around what is the identity that is the leadership identity that needs to emerge. And so we're in this emergent phase, and that emergent phase. And I think that's one of the challenges for leaders and managers right now, is that we're not in a world that we're familiar with just yet. So one of the elements of mastery, and what I was sharing with her, is this human-centered transformational model. And that's a redesign of how fluidly a leader is able to tune into, just like more and more prevalent in terms of situational awareness. And I'm sure you're familiar with the word situational awareness, but that's got to be even more prevalent now. So leaders and managers right now, number one, you cannot not have your finger on the pulse. That means you cannot not put your head in the sand and say, AI is coming or change is coming. No, it's here. And the need for reinvention and situational reinvention is of utmost importance. And to be really considering these big trends and how it's going to reshape the way people spend money. For example, the women's wealth transfer, people are going to spend money differently. Women make decisions differently. They have different buying and purchasing ways that they look at that. And there'll be certain industries that benefit. And so the ability of, just like a sports person, a leader or manager, to be very, very present with what the needs are of the person in front of themselves is going to be a skill set that needs to be really, I want to say, dialed in, right? Really being able to listen, and then being really way more assertive in terms of communicating. Let's say we're in the workplace and finding the solution and the best fit solution for now, and how it is beneficial to taking the organization forward, or a project forward, or an initiative forward. And the idea of like, okay, I've got my kids and I've got to fetch my kids and I've got to, there has to be a win-win type of situation. So I think this orientation towards, I call it like synchronistic, in my programs, I call it synchronistic relationships, which is an orientation towards win-win, where traditionally maybe in organizations it was like, we win, put your child, fetching your child off from school, put this, like it's a give and take. And I think there has to be a far more stronger orientation towards that, and far stronger like boundary setting in the context of what is okay and what's not, with some flexibility depending on context. So and then importantly is like, and that's why I said it's emergent, is leaders actually carving out deep thinking and intuiting time for themselves and for themselves as a team. Companies, teams are going to have to think very deeply about how they emerge in all of this change and take the organization and its people forward. What is the new identity and cultural identity that we now need as we move forward? And it might only be relevant for a year, and then we may have to reinvent it for 2 years' time. And that is the same with a quantum leader. It's like, what is the identity that is needed now from myself in order to lead this team through? And that is some deep introspection work, some emotional regulation, some self-efficacy, some agency work, sense of self, really knowing my communication patterns and styles, and then being able to take these pieces, just some of the pieces that I've mentioned. The other piece that I just want to add in, which is a very relevant piece, which I think hasn't been given enough attention, is embodied intelligence. And this is the idea of how do we as a team, and this is very new, and I think I'm working with an organization, in fact, in South Africa, who's implementing some of the first pieces of the design of a program I'm doing with them. But embodied intelligence is marrying the masculine and feminine, the intuition, and then as a team, deliberately creating either solutions or a direction the organization needs to use. So they're actually harnessing the field, the quantum, in a way that works for everybody, because I appreciate there is, different religious thoughts or different conversations that happen around, let's say, the idea of spirituality. So it's just how you harness this energy system and power in a collective, because that is extremely powerful.
So I'm going to ask you at this point our holy grail question of coaching, which is in 1 to a maximum of 3 words. What do you think makes a great coach?
Contextual awareness, 2 words.
Beautiful. That answer fits in almost directly with what you just said as well, doesn't it? Around, situational reinvention, contextual awareness, so important moving forward. Please expand.
I would describe it as a capability. And so coaches, and I've looked quite a lot into the industry, I use AI a lot. AI is the tool. AI is not the coach, but it's the tool. And I've got better and better in terms of working with AI. And AI, especially for coaches, I'm talking more business coaches or sports coaches, got more the technical side of things, but also the human side of things. What AI is going to be really adept at being able to do is do very results-orientated coaching. It can give me a breakdown of the most incredible plan if I ask it, like, I want to make more money in the next 3 months. How am I going to do it? And, I'm obviously giving it very specific prompts that are related to me, and I ask it to play a particular role, even for a strategist, which is, I'm a strategist by heart. And I, as much as I'm able to integrate the spiritual realm and the quantum realm, I'm very delivery orientated. And so the contextual awareness comes back to one of the very first questions that you asked me when you were talking about sports, and really the ability to stay present, because what AI can't do, AI cannot be in front of a person and understand the contextual environment with which a person is in, a client is in, an organization is in. It can summarize the patterns of what's changing in the world, but it can't contextually be in the moment and be able to solution with you in the moment. And so I think really effective coaches are going to be able to be in front of someone, going to be able to, they would have harnessed their, I want to call it their unique category of one, secret sauce. What I mean by this, I mean that we all have superpowers that I do believe personally have come online. I call them our spiritual technologies are becoming more and more online. And again, for those people who are attuned to this sort of work and it resonates. And so harnessing that secret sauce, coaches will be able to be in front of teams and in front of individuals. They will receive packets of information, hits for that team, for the solution, for the organization, and be able to connect the dots across various contexts for that wisdom to come through them, to be transmitted, and play the role where AI currently holds a mirror up for me in certain aspects. They will then be these vessels of intuitive wisdom that will unlock for organizations, individuals, teams, something very unique in that organization, team, or person. AI will never be able to receive downloads from the universe or hits or intuitive hits. It can only respond to the prompt that I'm giving it. And this is what truly makes us truly unique, and what will make a coach an advisor, a strategist, you will receive very specific information that's relevant for a particular organization, and then wrapping that into the practical strategy is what I'd say contextual awareness.
And it's also what I'm hearing is the other superpower that coaches need to tap into is reading of the emotions, which is
100%.
100% what I heard you saying. It's the intuition of this person's just a bit uncomfortable. They're moving their shoulder in a weird way. The energy they're giving off, that they're not happy with a certain strategy or whatever it might be. You're contextualizing that. You're reading the signals, and I think that really there you sort of, these topics have been quite different than what we normally talk about on the podcast, which I love. I'm always trying to find unique guests, and but all these concepts tap into this beautiful summary. You've almost landed the episode around this contextual awareness in everything that we've spoken about so far, which is just, yeah, I'm excited about it, because I think the reason I'm excited about it too is because as a coach, I never have a session and I'm like, oh, I've mastered coaching. Coaching is it's a daily practice because of the people that you're in front of, whether it be a group, if you're a leader, you're a manager, tweaking your ability to harness these hidden sources, I think is really cool. So let's maybe finish. What are your have you got maybe top 3 tips around this truest self, these superpowers? Just what can people do to help reveal that?
I have a concept called what I call your unique profitability space. And this is a deep dive into being ruthlessly honest with yourself in terms of coming back to selecting yourself. So tool number 1, and just to very quickly express what does select yourself mean? It means go back in your childhood, spend some time there, and all the times that you were just naturally entrepreneurial or naturally the leader or naturally the sporty person, or you just did these things naturally so well. For example, I used to be able to I was the 3rd child, youngest of 3, middle income. And I was always finding ways to make money. It was fascinating, extremely entrepreneurial from a very young age. Spend time going back into those years of what you just did naturally. That is your current, and that is the current, when I said about the eagles, that is available for you. And I always used to just select myself into whatever, sell Coke bottles, or sell erasers, or we had marbles, make little marbles, or have cards, and I used to always be busy with something, making money. No one was telling me how to do that. No one was giving me directions. I self-selected. So what is so unique to you? I'll use these 2 phrases: superior and distinct. Those are the 2 key words, what makes you superior and distinct in the context of what you specifically do. We come from coaching, advisory, we both come from sports, but there would be things that you do in your practice, in the way that you work with clients, that is superior and distinct, that I can't copy. And you've got to learn to throw away what's no longer relevant. So that's the first thing, is the self-selection. I would say, like I said, for leaders, start getting into a place where you are thinking deeply. Create stillness, whether it's meditation, contemplation. Have some kind of practice that it's between you and the universe. It's between you and creator. It's between you and your spirit. It's between you and your heart. It doesn't matter. You can but it's with you and you. And that is your time that grounds you, where you learn to cultivate and harness the practice of receiving intuitive hits, of opening up to your spiritual technologies and superpowers. Start exploring that realm, and then be in community. Start orientating towards communities that really and why I say this is like the timelines, the realities that you prefer. What do you no longer prefer, and what do you prefer? And that means hanging around with people who will uplift you, hanging around with people who are like going to uplift you, hanging around with people who are the level above you, or when I say above you, who have a skill set that you really aspire to, that have done it, etc., and like elevate yourself continuously.
Well, normally I try and give a summary, but I have 2 pages of notes here, so I'm not sure. Words like liberation, reinvention, listen, self-select, trust, decentralize, and step into your own unique self, your trueness, with sovereignty and servant leadership in this new quantum world. Thank you, Sjeanne. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for being on the coaching podcast.
Thank you for your time. It's been so great. I really appreciate it, Em, and to everybody out there listening. Thank you so much for your time and just for the contributions that you make to the world.
Absolutely. You can learn more about Sjeanne Cawdry at her website, which is centerofliberation.com. And appreciate you all. See you next time. Thanks for listening.
The Coaching Podcast is sponsored by Transition Coach for Athletes, a global coaching, mentoring, and US college sporting scholarship placement service. The service helps athletes navigate the often challenging world of choosing your best college fit while maximizing sports performance. Visit www.transitioncoachforathletes.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show. The ball is in your court to take action and enjoy your coaching.